The night hung heavy over Arlington, Virginia, a thick shroud of silence broken only by the faint buzz of streetlights and the distant wail of a stray dog. The air was sticky with late summer humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel like a chore. Down a quiet stretch of Maple Drive, a sleek black SUV sliced through the shadows, its engine purring low and steady, a predator stalking the dark. Behind the wheel sat Talia Porter, a black woman in her mid-30s, her hands firm on the leather grip, her eyes glinting like polished steel under the dashboard's dim glow. She was tired, bone-deep tired, but sharp as ever, her mind ticking through the final steps of a covert CIA op that had kept her buried in this suburban nowhere for months. Almost done, she thought, glancing at the dashboard clock. Midnight had come and gone, one clean exit, and a ghost again. But ghosts don't get off that easy. Red and blue lights erupted in her rear-view mirror, a sudden explosion of color that shattered the night like gunfire. Talia's pulse didn't jump shed, faced worse than this in Kandahar alleyways, in Moscow backrooms, but her senses snapped to razor focus. She eased the SUV to a stop, hands steady at 10 and 2, watching as two figures stepped from the patrol car behind her. Officers Brandon Carter and Mark Sullivan, their silhouettes sharp against the flashing lights, swaggered toward her like they owned the asphalt beneath their boots. Carter, tall and broad with a jaw like a brick wall, led the charge, his flashlight swinging up to blind her. Sullivan, shorter and stockier, followed close, his eyes darting like a hyena sniffing for weakness. "Well, well," Carter drawled, his voice thick with venom as he leaned into her window, breath sour with stale coffee and spite. "Look what we've got here. Another one of you thinking she can roll through my town like she owns it." His beam swept her face, lingering too long, a power play dressed up as procedure. Sullivan snorted, circling to the passenger side. "Blew that stop sign back there like it's a damn suggestion," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Typical. Talia's jaw tightened, but her face stayed stone-cold neutral. She'd stopped at that signful, deliberate textbook. She never slipped on details. It was how she'd survived a decade of shadows and bullets. This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup, and these two were itching for it. "I stopped," she said, her voice low, measured, cutting through their noise like a blade. "You know I did." Carter's lips twisted into a sneer, and he slammed his meaty hand down on her hood, the metal ringing out in the still night. "Out of the car, princess," he barked, loud enough to wake half the block. "Now, or I drag your sorry ass out myself." Sullivan was already at the trunk, popping it open with a theatrical grunt. Talia unbuckled her seatbelt, slow and deliberate, stepping onto the pavement with the grace of a panther. "Careful, boys," she said, her words soft but laced with ice. "You're fishing in deep water. Hope you can swim." Carter laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that echoed off the empty houses. "Big mouth on this one," he said, turning to Sullivan. "Let's see how loud she talks when we bury her." Sullivan grinned, pulling a small plastic bag from the trunk, white powder glinting under his flashlight. "Well, damn," he said, faking surprise so badly it was almost comical. "What's this? Looks like our girl's been busy." Talia's eyes flicked to the bag, then back to Carter. It wasn't hers. She'd checked that trunk herself 4 hours ago, clean as a whistle. Planted, her mind snapped, gears spinning fast. Amateurs. Shed-faced warlords who tried slicker moves than this and lived to laugh about it. Inside, a fire flared. Not fear, but fury, memories of her brother, framed by cops like these, dying behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. Not again. Not under my watch. She felt the micro-tracker, hidden in her jacket seam, her thumb brushing it lightly. One press, and her team would know. They'll come, and these clowns will burn. Carter stepped closer, towering over her, his smirk pure poison. "You're done, sweetheart. I'll have you begging by sunrise." He snapped the cuffs on, yanking her wrist hard enough to bruise. Talia didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, locking eyes with him, her faint smile a dagger in the dark. "You just lit a fuse you can't put out," she whispered, her voice a promise wrapped in steel. "Wait for it." The screen cut to black, the wail of sirens fading into silence, leaving a question hanging in the air. Who the hell is she, and what's she about to unleash? Hey, if that got your blood pumping, smash that like button right now. A voiceover kicked in, bright and urgent. This is just the start. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the twist that'll blow your mind. Let's dive into this together. Stick around. The patrol car's engine hummed low as it rolled through Arlington's empty streets, headlights cutting through the humid haze. Talia sat in the back seat, wrists bound tight behind her, the cuffs digging into her skin just enough to remind her they were there. She didn't fidget or slumber, spine stayed straight, her gaze fixed out the window, tracking every turn, every flicker of light off the cracked pavement. The glow of passing street lamps painted fleeting shadows across her face, but her expression never wavered. Calm, cold, unreadable. Inside, though, her mind was a storm of precision. Carter and Sullivan, she cataloged, replaying the stop. Carter's the alpha arrogant, reckless. Sullivan's the follower nervous, sloppy. The bag in her trunk was a cheap prop, too obvious to fool anyone paying attention. She'd seen setups like this before, crude, desperate moves by men who thought power came from a badge. They've got no idea who they're playing with. Up front, Brandon Carter gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, a smirk tugging at his lips as he glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Not so chatty now, huh?" he said, his voice thick with smug satisfaction. "Thought you were hot stuff back there." "What's the matter, cat? Got your tongue?" Sullivan chuckled from the passenger seat, twisting around to leer at her. "Yeah, she's real quiet now. Guess the cuffs shut that smart mouth up." Talia met Carter's eyes in the mirror, her stare steady, unflinching. "I don't waste words on dead men walking," she said, soft but sharp, each syllable a quiet blade. Sullivan's laugh faltered, his brow creasing for a split second before he forced it back. Carter's smirk twitched, but he didn't bite, just shook his head and muttered, "Keep dreaming, princess." The radio crackled faintly between them, a static hum filling the silence, but Talia could feel it, the tiniest crack in their bravado. She filed it away. They're not as solid as they think. The Arlington PD station loomed ahead, a squat brick building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a dying insect. Carter yanked the car into the lot, tires crunching gravel, and hauled Talia out with a rough tug on her arm. "Move it," he growled, shoving her toward the entrance. Sullivan trailed behind, clutching the planted bag like a trophy, his chest puffed out. Inside, the air stank of burnt coffee and sweat, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glare over scuffed linoleum floors and chipped desks. A handful of night-shift cops lounged around, some typing lazily, others sipping from styrofoam cups, barely glancing up as Carter marched Talia through. "Got a live one tonight," Carter announced, loud and brash, his voice bouncing off the walls. He jerked Talia to a stop near the booking counter and nodded at Sullivan, who tossed the bag onto the desk with a thud. "Caught her red-handed," Sullivan added, grinning like a kid showing off a prize catch. "Powder in the trunk, bold as brass." Talia stood silent, her eyes sweeping the room counting cameras, noting exits, clocking faces. She spotted an old surveillance unit in the corner, its lens cloudy with dust. Low budget, sloppy security. Her tracker's signal was live. Her team would lock onto this dump soon enough. At the front desk, Officer James Keller, a wiry 23-year-old with tired eyes and a rookie's stiff posture, looked up from his keyboard. His fingers froze mid-type as he took in the scene. Carter's swagger, Sullivan's grin, and Talia still as a statue, her face a mask of calm that didn't fit the chaos around her, and he'd processed dozens of arrests in his 6 months here. But something about this one gnawed at him. She wasn't yelling, wasn't pleading, just watching. "Name?" he asked, his voice quieter than he meant it to be, almost swallowed by the station's hum. "Talia Porter?" she replied, her tone even, eyes locking onto his for a heartbeat. Keller nodded, typing it in, but his gut twisted when her file popped up. Virginia license, local address, occupation listed as independent consultant. No priors, no tickets, not even a parking fine. Too clean. He glanced at the bag, then at Carter, who was already barking at another cop about paperwork. Too convenient, Keller thought, his thumb brushing the edge of his desk. Had grown up 2 towns over, watching friends get hassled by cops for nothing stopped for looking wrong, pinned with charges that never stuck. This felt like that, but worse. Consultant, huh? Sullivan said, leaning over Keller's shoulder to peek at the screen. What's that? Some fancy word for dealer? He laughed, but Keller didn't join in. Talia tilted her head slightly, her gaze flicking to Sullivan. It's a word for someone who knows more than you, she said, dry as dust. Sullivan's face darkened, but Carter cut in before he could snap back. Print her and lock her up, he ordered, clapping Sullivan on the shoulder. She's ours now. Keller hesitated as he took Talia's fingerprints, rolling her ink-stained fingers across the pad. Her hands were steady, her breathing slow like she was waiting for something. You don't seem worried, he muttered, barely audible, more to himself than her. Talia's lips curved, just a hint of a smile. Should I be? She asked, her voice low, piercing. Keller swallowed, looking away fast, but her words stuck like burrs in his brain. They led her to a holding cell down a dim hallway, the clang of the metal door echoing as it slammed shut. Carter lingered outside the bars, arms crossed, studying her with a mix of curiosity and contempt. Enjoy your new home, he said, his tone mocking. Maybe you'll get lucky. Judge might buy a sob story from a pretty face like yours. Talia sat on the bolted bench, back straight, meeting his stare head on. Or maybe they'll see through your bullshit, she replied, calm but cutting, her words hanging in the air like smoke. Carter's jaw tightened, and he turned away, muttering under his breath as he stomped off. Alone now, Talia leaned back against the cold concrete wall, exhaling slow and steady. The cell was a gray box bars casting long shadows, a faint drip echoing from a leaky pipe somewhere. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to think. Flashbacks flickered behind her lids, disarming a bomb in Kabul, the hiss of wires under her fingers, outwitting a Russian spy in a snow-choked alley, her breath fogging the air. This was child's play by comparison, but it hit harder. Her brother's face swam up, Malik, 19, wide grin, gone because of men like Carter. Not again, she vowed, her fist clenching. The tracker was active, her team was closing in. She just had to play the part a little longer quiet, unremarkable, invisible. Until she wasn't. Back in the break room, Carter and Sullivan sprawled in plastic chairs, steaming mugs in hand, laughing over the arrest. She's nothing, Carter said, kicking his boots up on a table. Another mark for the books. Sullivan nodded, slurping his coffee. Bet she's sweating in there, tough act or not. Neither noticed Keller lingering near the door, his face pale, his fingers twitching. Had pulled their arrest logs on a hunch too many drug busts, too many names like Talia's, too many perfect stories. Something was rotten, and it was starting to stink. Outside, miles away, a black sedan idled in a shadowed alley. A voice crackled through a secure line. Signals live. She's in play. The driver adjusted his tie, eyes hard. Good. Let's move. The holding cell was a concrete tomb, its walls stained with years of neglect, the air thick with the tang of rust and disinfectant. Talia sat motionless on the metal bench, her back against the cold slab, legs crossed like she was waiting for a bus, not rotting in lockup. The faint drip of a pipe somewhere down the hall punctuated the silence, a metronome to her thoughts. She didn't sleep. Sleep was for people who didn't hear the clock ticking. Her mind churned, sharp and relentless, piecing together every detail since the stop. Carter's overconfidence, Sullivan's twitchy hands, the too clean bag of powder. They've done this before, she reasoned, her fingers tracing the edge of the bench. A system, not a fluke. The tracker in her jacket was live, a silent lifeline pinging her team. She pictured them now, gearing up, closing in, ready to flip this game on its head. All she had to do was wait, watch, and strike when the crack showed. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, slow and hesitant, different from Carter's heavy stomp or Sullivan's eager shuffle. Talia opened her eyes, head tilting slightly as Officer James Keller appeared outside the bars. His uniform hung loose on his lanky frame, his face pale under the fluorescent glare, eyes darting like he was breaking some unspoken rule just by being there. He stopped, gripping the edge of the wall, his voice low and unsteady. Miss Porter, he said, barely above a whisper. You said something earlier about seeing through bullshit. Talia studied him, her gaze piercing but patient, like a hawk sizing up a sparrow. He's close, she thought. One push, and he's mine. I did. she replied, her tone soft but commanding, pulling him in. You've seen something, haven't you? Something that doesn't add up. Keller swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I don't know what you mean, he muttered, but his eyes betrayed him, flickering with doubt, guilt, fear. Talia leaned forward just enough to catch his full attention. You do, she said, her words deliberate, slicing through his defenses. You're not like them, Keller. You know they're lying. How long you gonna play their dope? The question hit like a punch. Keller's hand tightened on the wall, his knuckles whitening. He saw it again, his childhood friend Jamal, 16, cuffed on a corner for resisting, a dime bag magically appearing in his pocket. Keller had joined the force to stop that, not enable it. You don't get how it works here, he said, voice cracking, his excuse sounding hollow even to himself. Talia's eyes didn't waver. I get more than you think, she said. I know what it's like to feel trapped, to think you've got no choice. But you do, Keller. You always do. He stared at her, chest tight, then turned and bolted down the hall, his boots slapping the floor. Talia leaned back, exhaling slow. She'd planted the seed, now it'd grow or die. Either way, she'd use it. In the break room, Carter and Sullivan sprawled across mismatched chairs, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the bitter stench of burnt coffee. Carter tilted his mug back, gulping down the dregs, then slammed it on the table. She's sitting in there like she's on vacation, he said, shaking his head. Thinks she's untouchable. Sullivan smirked, picking at his nails with a pocket knife. Yeah, well, she's in for a rude awakening. We've got the bag, the report no witnesses. Slam dunk. Carter nodded, but his eyes narrowed. Keller was acting weird, though. Kid looked jumpy when we brought her in. Sullivan shrugged, flicking the knife shut. He's fresh meat, probably scared of his own shadow. What's he going to door at us out? Carter didn't laugh. Keep an eye on him, he said, voice darkening. Last thing we need is some rookie poking around where he shouldn't. Keller wasn't in the break room. He was back at his desk, hunched over his monitor, the blue glow casting shadows across his face. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling, as he pulled up Carter and Sullivan's arrest logs again. The list stretched along dozens of stops, all minor infractions ballooning into drug charges, all minorities, all airtight on paper. Too airtight. His stomach churned as he clicked through, Jamal's ghost in every line. He opened a secure email, hands shaking harder now, and started typing. To whom it may concern, something's wrong here. Files attached. Help. He hit send, heart slamming against his ribs. No clue who'd catch it or if they'd care. The station's hum masked a new sound tires crunching gravel outside. Maria Vasquez, a local reporter with a firecracker reputation, swung her beat-up hatchback into the lot. She hopped out, camera slung over her shoulder, dark hair pulled tight in a ponytail. She'd gotten a tip from an ex-con last week, cops planting evidence, targeting the vulnerable. Tonight, she smelled blood. She stormed through the front doors, heels clicking, voice sharp as she zeroed in on the desk sergeant. Heard you're jailing innocents again, she said, holding up her phone like a weapon. Care to comment? Carter emerged from the break room, coffee still in hand, his face twisting into a scowl. Get lost, Vasquez, he snapped, stepping into her path. Or you'll be next on the list. Maria didn't flinch. She hit record. Say that again for the camera, tough guy. She shot back, her lens catching every twitch in his expression. Sullivan hovered behind, muttering, she's not worth it. But Carter's glare didn't budge. You're digging your own grave, he growled, then turned away, slamming the break room door behind him. Maria smirked, pocketing her phone. Got you rattled already, she thought. This is bigger than I figured. Back in her cell, Talia heard the faint commotion raise voices, a woman's clipped tone cutting through the station's drone. Outside pressure, she noted, filing it away. Then came a new chance. Carter stormed down the hall, still fuming from Maria, and stopped at her cell. What's wrong, princess? He sneered, banging the bars. Scared yet? Talia saw her opening. She slumped slightly, letting her shoulders sag, her voice dropping to a murmur. Maybe I am. Carter's eyes lit up victory, he thought. He leaned closer, grinning. Knew you'd crack. But Talia's slump was a feint. She snapped her head up, eyes locking onto his, voice low and lethal. Scared's for people with something to lose, she said. You should try it sometime. Carter froze, the grin sliding off his face. He stepped back, muttering a curse, and stalked off. Talia straightened, her mask back in place. Has rattled now. Good. Keller paced near this bathroom, Carter's words. Keep an eye on him ringing in his ears. He ducked inside, splashing water on his face when Sullivan barged in. The shorter cop loomed close, breath hot and sour. Digging too deep, kid, he hissed, shoving Keller against the sink. The mirror rattled as Keller's back hit it. You'll drown in it. Keller's fear flared, then hardened. He pushed back, chest heaving. Maybe you're the one sinking, he said, voice shaky but firm. Sullivan blinked, thrown, then stormed out. Keller gripped the sink, staring at his reflection. No turning back now. The station's rhythm stuttered as a black sedan rolled into the lot, its engine cutting off with a soft click. 3 figures stepped out, FBI badges glinting under the streetlights. Agent Daniel Price, grizzled and stern, led the pack, his suit crisp despite the hour. Inside a secure line, they'd caught Keller's email, not internal affairs, but Talia's sting operation, months in the making. Price adjusted his tie, voice low. She's inside. Let's make this clean. In her cell, Talia felt the shift of ripple in the air, subtle but real. She smiled faintly, the predator's edge creeping into her expression. They're here. The slow burn was over. The fuse was about to blow. The Arlington PD station went dead quiet as the front doors creaked open, the sound sharp against the usual hum of flickering lights and clacking keyboards. 3 figures stepped inside, their black suits cutting through the stale air like a blade through fog. Agent Daniel Price led the charge, his gray-streaked hair and hard-set jaw marking him as a man who'd stared down hell and walked away bored. Behind him, a tech agent lugged a laptop bag, and a younger woman kept her hand near her holster, eyes scanning the room. Price leaned over the front desk, his voice a low growl that brooked no argument. We need your records and the holding cells. Move it. The desk sergeant, a barrel-chested guy with a permanent sneer, froze, his meaty hand hovering over his radio. What's this about? He rasped, squinting. Federal investigation, Price shot back, his tone flat and final. You're wasting my time. The sergeant's jaw tightened, but he jerked his head toward the hallway, muttering, follow me. In the bullpen, Carter and Sullivan stumbled out of the break room, coffee cups trembling in their grips. Their laughter snuffed out as the agents spread like shadows. Keller sat at his desk, heart slamming against his ribs. His email had lit this fuse, and now it was blowing up in real time. Price didn't linger. He waved his tech into a cramped interrogation room, the door slamming shut with a metallic thud. Inside, the air was stale, the single bulb buzzing overhead as the tech plugged into the station's network. Screens flared to life case files, timestamps, grainy footage scrolling fast. Price leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his weathered face unreadable. What have we got? He asked, voice rough as gravel. The tech's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. A gold mine. Their arrests follow a pattern, same story, different faces. Traffic stops turning into drug busts, all clean on paper, all dirty underneath. This is systemic. Price's lips pressed into a thin line. Pull everything on Carter and Sullivan, he said. We're gutting this now. In the bullpen, Carter paced like a cornered dog, his mug abandoned on a desk, coffee pooling around it. Sullivan lingered close, wiping sweat from his forehead with a shaky hand. Feds? Sullivan hissed, voice breaking. You think it's her? Carter stopped, his glare slicing through the haze. Who else? That bitch set us up. His bravado was cracking, panic clawing at the edges. They've got nothing, he insisted, fists clenching. We followed the playbook. Sullivan nodded, but his eyes darted to Keller, who sat rigid, fingers hovering over his keyboard. Yeah, Sullivan mumbled, unconvinced. Sure. Down the hall, Talia felt the shift in her cell, the air tightening, new voices cutting through the station's drone. She straightened, her faint smile sharpening into something feral. Right on schedule, she thought. Her tracker had pinged her team, and Price was here, the final piece of a sting Shed spent months building. Carter and Sullivan were small fry. The real catch was still lurking, but she'd drag it into the light soon. For now, she sat still, the predator waiting for the trap to spring. Price emerged from the interrogation room, a thick folder in hand photos, transcripts, a noose of evidence. He strode into the bullpen, his presence a thunderclap. Brandon Carter, Mark Sullivan, he said, voice slicing the silence. We're talking. Carter forced a grin, stepping up with fake swagger. "What's this about, huh?" he asked, his tone too casual, too thin. "We're clean." Price's eyes didn't flicker. "Then you won't mind explaining this." He slapped the folder onto a desk, photos spilling out, Carter and Sullivan with the bag, caught on Talia's hidden cam before the stop. The interrogation room was a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension as Price sat across from the two cops. He slid the photo over, then a transcript. "Bury her deep, no loose ends," he read, his voice a slow burn. "That's you, Carter, on tape, courtesy of Miss Porter's device." Carter's face hardened, but he leaned back, arms crossed. "That's nothing," he said, jaw tight. "We were doing our job, securing evidence." Sullivan flinched, hands gripping the table. "You can't use that," he blurted, sweat beading on his lip. "It's entrapment." Price's smirk was cold, cutting. "It's admissible, and it's the tip of the iceberg. We've got dozens of your cases under review, same script, same lies." Another agent buzzed Talia's cell open, his tone clipped but respectful. "Miss Porter, you're clear." She stood, smooth as silk, brushing off her jacket like she'd been napping, not caged. She walked out, boots echoing, and paused at Keller's desk. Their eyes locked, his wide with awe, hers steady with quiet fire. "You grew a spine," she said, voice soft but piercing. "Keep it." Keller nodded, chest tight, a flicker of pride breaking through. Days later, the courtroom was a tinderbox rose packed with reporters, families, locals, the air electric with rage and hope. Carter and Sullivan slumped at the defense table, their lawyers scribbling useless notes. Talia took the stand, her CIA badge gleaming as she swore in. "Talia Porter, field operative," she said, voice clear as a bell. "I was tracking corruption. These two," she nodded at Carter, and Sullivan served it up. The gallery hummed, flashes popping, but Talia held steady. Price stepped up, a final audio file in hand, the knockout blow from Talia's tracker. "Frame her, or I'll burn you both," a gruff voice barked through the speakers. The crowd gasped as Captain Ray Hollins shot up from the back, face purple with fury. "She's lying," he roared, charging forward, shoving a bailiff aside. "You'll pay, you!" Talia sidestepped, her fist slamming into his nose with a wet crack blood sprayed, splattering the stand. Hollins stumbled, clutching his face as agents swarmed, cuffing him mid-scream. "Not today, Captain," she said, ice cold, standing tall amid the chaos. A woman in the gallery leapt up, tears streaming, short, graying hair, fists clenched. "That's for my she shouted, voice raw, trembling with years of pain. Her son had been one of Holland's victims, locked away on a lie. Others joined her shouts, sobs, fists pumping the room igniting as Price played the rest. Holland snarling, "Keep the streets dirty, Senator pays big." The rot ran deeper than two cops. It was a machine, and Holland had oiled the gears. Carter snapped, lunging up from his chair. "He made us do it," he yelled, pointing at Holland. "Said we'd lose everything, pensions, homes if we didn't play." Holland, blood dripping down his chin, laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. "You begged for the dirt, kid. Wanted the bonuses, the pats on the back." Sullivan shrank, hands over his face, muttering, "We're done." Talia stepped down, locking eyes with them. "You thought I was prey," she said, voice a low, lethal hum. "Look at you now, caged rats." Carter growled, straining against the bailiff, but Sullivan just crumpled, defeated. The gavel crashed. Carter and Sullivan got 25 years each falsifying reports, planting evidence, abuse of power. Holland drew life, no parole, his senator lifeline a public noose. Keller testified, voice steady as he laid out the station's playbook, sealing their fates. Outside, the crowd roared as the trio was led away, Carter spitting, Sullivan silent. Holland's head bowed under a hail of jeers and thrown cups. Mariah's camera caught it all, her voiceover sharp. "This is justice, live and list loud." The station bled out, resignations stacked up, new blood sworn in under a spotlight. Keller stood at his desk, a whistleblower now, clutching Talia's USBA nationwide fight waiting. She met him later at a diner, sliding a card over. "You've got the guts," she said. "Use it." Then she vanished into the dusk, leaving Arlington forever changed. The Arlington night stretched out under a sky pricked with stars. a cool breeze rustling the autumn leaves that clung to the trees along Maple Drive. On a rooftop overlooking the town, Talia Porter stood alone, a solitary figure against the city's shimmering sprawl. Her boots gripped the gravel, her jacket fluttering as she cradled a chipped ceramic mug, steam curling up from the coffee inside. The heat seeped into her palms, a quiet anchor as her sharp eyes traced the streets below. Streets shed torn apart and left to heal. Sodium lights flickered like fireflies, cars hummed faintly, and somewhere a dog barked, its echo bouncing off brick and concrete. They thought they owned this place, she thought. Carter's snarl and Holland's bloodied nose flashing in her mind. I burned their thrones to ash. Footsteps crunched behind her, deliberate and unhurried. Agent Daniel Price emerged from the stairwell, his suit wrinkled from a day that never seemed to end, a manila folder tucked under his arm. "Chicago's calling," he said, tossing it onto the ledge with a soft thud. Photos and maps peeked out another mission, another shadow to chase. "You in?" Talia's gaze flicked to the file, then back to him, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Always," she replied, her voice low and steady, a promise forged in steel. She took another sip, the bitter taste grounding her, but her thoughts lingered on Arlington. Malik's face swam up his wide grin, his 19 years snuffed out by men like Holland in a cell just like hers. Not again, she'd sworn that night in the patrol car. Never again. She pulled a lighter from her pocket. Flicking it, and a tiny flame danced in the wind, a symbol of the fire shed lit here, and the one shed carry on. Down at the station, James Keller stood in a briefing room, his new sergeant stripes gleaming under the fluorescent hum. A dozen rookies faced him, their faces a mix of nerves and hunger, pens scratching notes as he paced. "You're not here to nod and obey," he said, his voice firm, carrying the weight of every choice he'd made. "You're here to question, to dig, to break what's rotten. That's your job, don't forget it." He tapped the Talia had slipped him at the diner, its weight a quiet vow in his pocket, hundreds of cases, a nationwide web of corruption waiting to unravel. The bullpen outside buzzed with fresh faces, the old guard's resignation still echoing through the halls. Keller wasn't the scared kid from that bathroom showdown anymore. He was a torchbearer, stoking the flames Talia had left behind. Across town, Maria Vasquez hunched in her beat-up hatchback, the glow of her laptop casting shadows across her sharp features. Her latest upload flickered on-screen footage of Carter, Sullivan, and Holland in cuffs. The crowds wore a thunderous backdrop. "This is what happens when you mess with the wrong woman." Her voiceover cut through, crisp and unyielding. Titled "The Badge That Bled," it hit 2 million views overnight. Comments exploding. "She's a hero. Take 'em all down." Outside the courthouse, memory lingered a mother with graying hair. The one who'd screamed in the gallery now stood on her porch, clutching a photo of her freed son. "She gave us this," she whispered to the night, tears streaking her face as her boy slept upstairs, exonerated. Maria hit refresh, grinning as the numbers climbed. "This town's awake," she thought, "and I'm keeping it that way." The fallout had reshaped Arlington like a quake. Carter and Sullivan moldered in federal pens 25 years each. No parole. Carter's defiance had curdled into silent stares at concrete walls. Sullivan's bravado dissolved into hunched shoulders and muttered regrets. Holland, locked in a max security hole, was a shadow of the captain he'd been life without parole. His senator lifeline snapped when the tapes aired. The station hemorrhaged, half its roster quit, higher-ups scrambling to dodge the scandal's fallout, but the damage stuck. New cops swore in under public eyes, reforms clawing through the wreckage. Cases flipped, innocents walked, dozens of lives reclaimed from the ways Holland's machine had spun. That mother's cry in court echoed in every reopened file, every tearful reunion. Talia lingered at the diner that night, longer than she'd planned. Keller sat across from her, his coffee untouched, fidgeting with the card she'd slid over. "You ever lose someone to this?" she asked, voice quiet, cutting through the hum of late-night chatter. Keller's eyes dropped, his jaw tightening. "A friend," he said. "Jamal, framed when we were kids, never made it out." Talia nodded, her gaze distant. "My brother," she said simply. "Malik." They sat in silence, two souls bound by loss, a thread stronger than words. Keep fighting, she added, standing. For them! Keller clutched the card, nodding her fire was his now. She stepped back from the rooftop ledge, the lighter's flame snuffed out as she pocketed it. Price watched, a rare glint of warmth in his stern eyes. You could have played it low-key, he said, half grinning. Talia's chuckle was draw-sharp, and missed their faces when it crashed. No chance. She turned, boots crunching as the stairwell door clicked shut, the sound a full stop on this chapter. The fight rolled on, always would, but for now she savored the quiet weight of justice served, a promise kept to Malik's ghost. The lesson etched itself deep. Carter, Sullivan, Holland, they'd built empires on lies, thinking power made them gods. But one spark-owned voice had torched it all. Talia didn't just win. She proved what happens when you stand, when you strike. Keller carried it forward, Maria amplified it, and out there someone else would rise next. Evil festers in silence, she thought, but a single flame can burn it clean. Be that flame. The screen faded to black. Talia's rooftop shadowed the final frame. A voiceover burst in, bright and urgent. If that finale lit you up, if you felt justice hit like a freight train smash, that like button now. This story's proof one spark can change it all, and we've got more real-life fire coming. Subscribe, hit the bell, join the fight, drop a comment. Who'd you fight for? See you in the next one.